systematic, explicit, and engaging using multiple modes and senses. 7, universal screening and progress monitoring are critical to ensure all students receive the right instruction. And number 8, science-based reading instruction reduces the need for intervention and allows children to move forward as capable, confident readers.
Fantastic. Does anything stand out on, and I also forgot to call out, I'm recording this call, so it is going to be recorded. Anything stand out on numbers 5 through 8?
I think number 5 stands out to me just because it feels like right now nationally there's such a focus on phonics and phonemic awareness, which is great, but in that climate, it's just important for us to not lose sight of comprehension, background knowledge, and vocabulary.
Absolutely. So CKLA is a knowledge building curriculum. So it's this idea that students become experts in a particular unit or a particular topic, and they learn about different topics throughout the year and from year to year. So students will become more familiar with that particular topic as the year progresses, but then from second grade to third grade to fourth grade. And it's this idea that students don't have to be limited to learning what their reading level is. So kindergarten students can learn vocabulary and background knowledge about things way more advanced than the cat is fast. They can learn about what a deciduous tree is and the seasons of nature and lots of different things like that. All right, fantastic. Throughout our session today, if you see any of these principles reflected in CKLA, I'll give you a minute to just jot those down, and those will be on page 5 of your participant notebook. Okay, so let's talk about what reading is and what writing is. So reading is this process of taking print and turning it to speech. So I can see all these letters here, and I can read this as print, and I'm reading it out loud as speech. And writing is this process of taking the speech or the thoughts in our head and turning it to print. So this is a reciprocal process, meaning that the more reading that we're doing, the better our writing will become. The more writing that we're doing, the better our reading will become. Now, we can break this down into the simple view of reading and the simple view of writing. So the simple view of reading is saying that skilled reading is the process of taking language comprehension and word recognition. So thinking about it like a two-sided coin. Language comprehension is this idea, it's the background knowledge, it's the vocabulary, it's the glue that makes everything stick. So it's why we can have ideas relate or connect. Word recognition is that ability to know your sounds, your letters, your phonics, being able to decode those words. So we need both of these skills to become skilled readers. Skilled writing is the process of composition, being able to create ideas, compose them, and also transcription, knowing how to spell them or encode these words. So to have skilled writing, we need both to create these ideas and then transcript them. Language comprehension and composition is a reciprocal process. Word recognition and transcription is a reciprocal process. And so this skilled reading and skilled writing, it's building on itself. And so within Amplify CKLA, writing isn't this afterthought or this separate silo. It's all interconnected together. And so the content that we're working on in reading, we're also going to be working on in writing. And so thinking about it like this, if I'm learning about ancient Rome for 3 weeks, I'll be able to write a lot about it because we've become an expert in that particular topic. I have a lot of background knowledge, and so I'll be able to support my ideas in both reading and in writing. This is the literacy rope. The literacy rope takes that skilled reading and breaks it down into individual strands here. We can see here that language comprehension, that ability to make meaning, have background knowledge, it's the vocabulary. This becomes increasingly strategic. Increasingly strategic, meaning that if I've read 100 mystery novels and I pick up a new mystery novel, chances are I'll be able to think about it pretty strategically. I'll know the plot, the character development, all of those things. Whereas if I don't have as many don't have as much experience with reading mystery novels, I might not be able to think about it as strategically because I don't have that framework. Same thing with word recognition. Word recognition becomes increasingly automatic, meaning that when I see this word increasingly here, I don't have to sound it out. Increasingly. We've become automatic readers. We become automatic readers through repeated practice. And so we want to have students both develop their language comprehension and their word recognition. Now, in CKLA, in grades K2, these are broken up into 2 separate lessons. So they'll have 1 hour of knowledge where they're developing their knowledge, their vocabulary, their mental model, their reasoning. They'll also have 1 hour of skills where they're developing their words, their letters, their ability to decode. On page 6 through 7 of your participant notebook, you'll also have a note catcher there about what each of these strands is. We won't take a minute here, but just know that you have this as a note catcher on page 6 and 7. So Amplify CKLA is a tier 1 core instruction, meaning that all students are getting grade level instruction. And so this might be different than what some schools are used to if they were using guided reading. Guided reading is that idea that I should break my class up into groups and have some of them read on grade level text, some of them read above grade level text, some of them read below grade level text, and teaching them at their specific level. The problem with this is that during this tier 1 core instruction, like we were talking about, it's the matter of equity. All students should have access to grade level instruction so that if I'm on 4th grade, but reading 2 grade levels below, I will always just stay a few grade levels below instruction. And so we can make sure that our questions, our ability to make meaning from a text, our ability to connect ideas should all be grade level instruction. That's not to say that there shouldn't be targeted small group at off grade level being above or below grade level, but the CKLA is a tier 1 core instruction. We do have tier 2 supports, but most of our time today will be focusing on that tier 1 instruction. And then your tier 3 would be any intensive individual intervention. So let's talk about what this looks like in K2. So in kindergarten through 2nd grade, they will have 1 hour of knowledge and 1 hour of skills. In knowledge, they're going to be working on that language comprehension and composition. And word recognition, they're going to be working on that. And skills, they'd be working on that word recognition and transcription. Let's talk about what this would look like in your schedule. So these lessons could be back to back. So it could be from you have your skills and then knowledge, or it could also be you have skills at one point in the day and then knowledge at another point in the day. So they can be back to back. They do not have to be back to back. So they could be at separate times in the day.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
Can I ask a nuanced question about writing?
Please.
So I know that like encoding and handwriting happens in skills. Where do some of the language standards, the Common Core language standards, come in around like composing a complete sentence? Is that composition, or would that come in the skills or in the knowledge strand?
So the writing the complete sentence in skills, but the developing the more complete sentence in knowledge. So like in knowledge, they encourage students to answer in complete sentences like audibly, but in skills, that's encouraging more to write in those complete sentences.
Okay, so like understanding that a sentence, like I'm thinking about the kindergarten or 1st grade standards around like using the proper punctuation at the end of a sentence. Is that more in the knowledge strand or more in the skills strand?
Skills.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for coming off mute to ask that question. I appreciate that. Within skills and knowledge, you'll also notice that they don't align perfectly within that skills 1 and knowledge 1. So you might be teaching knowledge 2 at the same time that you're teaching skills 1. It's helpful to really think about them as 2 totally separate lessons. So you might be on knowledge 3 and skills 2 at the same time. They're not going to overlap. So let's review some scheduling. So the skills strand and knowledge strand can be taught separately. It is a tier 1 core instruction. Writing instruction is integrated into Amplify CKLA. The skills strand units and the knowledge strand domains vary in instructional days. Now we'll talk about the program design for 3rd through 5th grade. So in 3rd grade, it's going to be 120 minutes. And in 4th and 5th grade, each lesson is going to be 90 minutes. So what that could be is if you are a self-contained teacher, you could have a CKLA. The goal is to have it 1 2-hour block, but you know that's not always possible within the master schedule. But for 3rd grade, that goal is to have it as 1 2-hour block. And then 4th grade, if you are departmentalized, you could have separate classes or at just 1 90-minute block. Some reminders are that the lessons should be taught in order. And I know that sounds like common sense, but in a lesson, we want to make sure that the writing is happening at the right time. And so teach those lesson components in the order that you see them. And targeted small group instruction can occur during instruction or outside of that instructional time. And here you'll see that pacing guide. So each one of those units is about 3 weeks. So students will become an expert in classic tales, animal classification, ancient Rome. And within writing, CKLA emphasizes quality over quantity. So what does that mean? That within CKLA, like we were just talking about, we talk about developing a strong sentence. And then within that strong sentence, developing a strong paragraph, and then developing strong multi-paragraphs. Like we were just saying, in a knowledge building curriculum, the writing progresses naturally because we've developed these ideas and we've thought about this critically for an extended period of time. And so students do produce this quantity naturally, but we really emphasize the quality over the quantity. We could see here the genres by each unit of writing. And so this is for 1st grade and 2nd grade skills. You can see they have narrative, informative, and opinion persuasive. This is for the knowledge strand writing. And this is for 3rd. And these are in the PD library. I'll show you where these are a little bit later in our session, but this is the genres for writing for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Kevin, is it safe to say here that for kindergarten specifically, that if you go back 2 slides, I believe, yeah, so it shows here 1st and 2nd. So genre writing in the skills strand picks up in 1st and 2nd, but they do not experience that in the kindergarten.
For kindergarten, it is mostly the decoding. So in kindergarten, it's a lot of the letter sounds. The writing is actually the penmanship, but it is not the genre itself is not going to be narrative, informative. It would be more so writing CVC words.
And sentence formation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
Just building off that, one other clarifying questions. When kindergartners are writing sentences, are those most often, or are they both in response to the reading that has been done and the knowledge strand, and in the encoding work that happens in the skills block, or is there a heavier emphasis on the skills block writing?
Say that question again one more time. I'm sorry.
I'm wondering in kindergarten specifically, are they writing in both the knowledge block and the skills block, or is their writing focused or limited in the skills block?
No, so the writing that they'd be doing in knowledge would be responding to the content that they're learning about. The writing that they're doing in skills would be learning more of the specific vowel patterns or the encoding in that type of way.
Okay. And letter formation is part of the skills block as well.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, within Amplify
And that, sorry, can I ask one more question?
Please.
Sorry, we like getting into the weeds. In the I think about the first grade standards that are so sort of like grammar or syntax specific, like compound sentences, complex sentences, using different conjunctions. That, let me check for my understanding. All of that instruction would happen in the skills block.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. So Amplify CKLA approach, it's going to intertwine that reading and writing instruction. Students see the writing process, so they work through that writing process over the course of a couple days, and it includes every formal stage of that writing process. Next, we'll talk about some assessments within CKLA. So CKLA has a lot of opportunities for teachers to informally and formally assess their students. The first type of assessment is going to be an informal one. It's called a check for understanding. These are embedded throughout the lesson. This is going to be your quick check-in with your class to see, are there any misconceptions? Are there any clarifying things that need to be addressed? What I recommend is for teachers to have a roster printed out, and for the checks for understanding is really just checking in with a few students and making sure that I'm hearing from these few students and those few students, just so that the teacher is not always calling on the same students. Formative assessments, those are going to be your activity book pages. This is those daily assessments that are aligned to those primary focus objectives. There are mid and end of unit assessments. These are helpful to look at when teachers are planning. So think about it as like a backwards planning opportunity. And then the last one is that placement and benchmark assessment. This is going to be that BOY, MOY, and end of year assessments. These are these happen in skills for K2, and then they're in the units for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I wanted to pause here. Any questions about the program design? And we'll spend a little bit more time looking at K2 skills, K2 knowledge, and 3rd through 5th grade integrated. But any questions about like the program design, the instructional minutes, the implementation of that?
As you're training people on this, are there any like misconceptions that are like really hard for people to learn based on the program design?
So some school district, I mean, we're in all 50 states, and so some school districts were like deep in guided reading, and I think that this can be a huge shift for them, because they're like, well, when do I have my guided reading? When do I have my guided reading? And this is saying that like all students deserve grade level instruction. It's not to say that we're not going to scaffold that instruction, but all students should have a grade level text in front of them during their tier 1 instruction. That can be, I think that is probably the hardest thing. I think there's been a lot of buzz in the reading wars about this, like what is equity? Why is it important that all students have grade level text in front of them? So we have a lot of resources for it. But especially that first year, like if I'm a 5th grade teacher, I'm so used to teachers teaching my students off grade level text. It can definitely be a shift for them, and they can feel like this is a lot, but it's something that like we have to start somewhere. And so we just identify, okay, if a student is having reading difficulty, what can I do? But how can I still build their vocabulary on grade level, and their questioning on grade level, and their writing on grade level?
Kevin, I have a question about the assessments. I saw on the website something that said that, let me check my notes specifically. The M-class assessment can replace the benchmark assessments in K2. Can you talk just a little bit more about that?
Yes, so Amplify has a couple different products. CKLA is their tier 1 instruction. M-class is sold as a different product, so not all customers have both. If schools do have CKLA and M-class, because it's a lot of BOY assessments at the beginning of the year, we tell them that M-class it's a lot of the same type of assessment, but it's all done digitally for you. So the teacher doesn't have to do any of the like paper pencil tracking and grading that they would have to in CKLA. So MClass does all of that. MClass will create the groups. MClass will give you the recommended activities for instruction, whereas CKLA is a little bit more of the like back end and paper administration of it. Any other thoughts, questions about that program design? All right, let's go into our skills strand. So I would love for you to take a minute. I'm going to set this 1 minute timer, and I want you to think about how many different ways can you spell the sound E. So for example, word me is E by itself, but how many other ways can you spell the sound E? At the end of this minute, I'll have us write it in the chat. How many guesses do you think you can spell the sound E? And no cheating by looking in Google. About 10 more seconds. All right, anybody want to come off mute and guess how many different ways can you spell the sound E?
I'll guess 5.
There are more than 5. Good guess. There are a few more than 5.
I'm gonna raise Christine's guess by 1 and say 6.
There are 8 ways. And so the sound E can be spelled E as in B, E as in me, Y is in funny, I is in ski, EA is in beach, IE is in cookie, EY is in key, and E blank E as in Pete. And trust me, I would have been like, I don't know, could it be anywhere from like 4 to 12? Like there are, and so why is this important as we're thinking about K2 skills? Because students are introduced to a sound and then a spelling, and they're introduced in that spelling from the most common, least tricky ways first. And so you'll see here this power bar. This shows you how common is that spelling for the sound E. So the most common actually is this letter Y by itself. And then some of the least common ways are this E blank E, EY, EE, which I wouldn't think about as E blank E as one of the least common, but it's helpful to know. So when students are learning this code, they're thinking about this power bar and what are the most common and least tricky spellings. And so,
Kevin, can I ask you something about power bar? I just put this in chat and then you
please.
answered it while I was hitting enter. So do you see the power bar is cool, for sure. How do students, how is their attention drawn to that, and what do they do with it?
Yes,
Is it their code book?
This is in their code book, that individual
Uh.
code chart. And yes, students are aware of this. And so when they're introduced to the sound, and so we'll look at a lesson, the sound oi. And so they'll learn how common is this spelling for oi? How common is this spelling for oi? They'll learn the different ways of OY is typically here, OI is typically here. And then they're encouraged to use defensible spelling, which just means I'm going to look at that code chart. And if I know the sound oi, I'm going to guess based on that power bar. Even if it's not the correct spelling, we still just want to use that power bar to say like, okay, in the context of this E is at the end of the word, I'm going to guess Y, but it could be EY kind of thing. And then in third, fourth, and fifth grade, what they'll do is they'll have that individual code chart. We encourage them to use it almost as like a dictionary of sounds. And then any words that do have a tricky spelling, we just encourage them to write it in there just so that they know this is how you spell the word blank, because it does have a tricky way. And we'll look at spelling a little bit more once we get to third, fourth, and fifth grade and really talk about like, what is syllabication? What are phonemes? How do we represent those phonemes? Because a lot of times I think third, fourth, and fifth grade teachers might not truly understand there are 44 phonemes and 150 ways to spell those phonemes. I think a lot of times when we think of spelling, it's just like throw in a vowel, throw in a consonant. And so it's like, no, this can explicitly be taught if we understand the phonemes and then also the syllabication of them. And so for K2 skills, when we're thinking about what happens in K2 skills, I want us to think about this word recognition side of that literacy rope. So students are learning their sounds, their letters, their words, and becoming increasingly automatic. So with K2 skills, all of these materials are available both print and digitally. We say digitally, students might have access to the digital experience. Kindergarten and first grade teachers probably not going to use that as much, but you'll see that all of these activity books that students have digitally, they also have, I'm sorry, all of the print materials, they'll also have digitally. So that would include the readers and the activity books. I do want to call out here that the readers do have nice features that can be read aloud to the students. And the activity books also have the opportunity to have students record their answer. And so if a student has difficulty with penmanship or writing in second grade, it is an accessibility feature that the student can record their answer and submit it digitally. So within K2 skills, we're thinking about foundational skills, those phonics of instruction, like we're thinking about the sounds, the spellings, we're thinking about writing, we're thinking about the assessments and the materials. We're going to start on pages 14 through 17 of your participant notebook. Pages 14 through 17, this is going to have your grade 1 skills 3. So that's the third skills unit. And I'll put that participant notebook in the chat again for us. That participant notebook is going to start with skills 3 on page 14 through 17. The unit introduction is going to tell you what is included in this unit. What are the sounds that students are learning? What are any special considerations? And so take 3 minutes to read over page 14, 15, 16, and 17. And then at the end of those 3 minutes, we will come back and go over what's included there. So I'll set that timer for 3 minutes. Take about 1 more minute, then we'll go over what's included in that Skills 3 unit introduction. All right, so let's start on page 14. The reason that we're looking at Skills 3 is because we'll watch a video of a teacher teaching a lesson in this unit. But think about Unit 3 as being kind of like November time of year in first grade. And so students will be introduced to 5 vowel sounds. These are all vowel digraphs, meaning that 2 vowels are making 1 sound. So the first is oo as in soon. Next, as in look, ow as in shout, oi as in oil, and aw as in paw. And so the goal here is that students have as much practice with these 5 vowel digraph sounds. We'll watch a teacher introduce the sound. And so when we think about how do we introduce the sound, we'll get into that once we're more into the lesson level. But here, the goal here is that students will become proficient with reading and writing these 5 vowel digraphs. It also has some special teacher considerations. The sound U and oo sound very similar, so make sure you can see students' mouths as they're saying it. And so it just has any of those considerations of like, we don't think about this as common or something to consider. So it's just pointing that out so teachers can really hear students differentiate those. It talks about the decodable fables. And so in this, we're reading, these stories are 100% decodable, meaning that every word on that page, students have learned the code of that. They've learned that those letter combinations, or they've learned it as a tricky word. And there are quite a few tricky words or words that don't follow that typical pattern. Like the word the is tricky because they learn E by itself makes so it's not the word the. So there are quite a few tricky words. When they do learn these tricky words, they underline the part that is tricky. And so they'll learn that as the tricky part of the word. And these decodable readers have those underlined parts of the word as tricky. And then they'll also have all of the sounds that they're practicing, all of these new sounds. These will be bold in those decodable readers. For the grammar, students will work on their verb tense. They'll practice identify whether a verb represents an action that is happening in the present or happened in the past. Spelling, we have our spelling that they will be doing. And this is for previously taught sound spelling correspondences. And so I want to call out here that spelling, some teachers might be a little confused why they're not practicing these specific vowel patterns, because the goal is to assess what they have already learned. And so these spelling words with these particular sounds will come up in a few units. But for this, it will be spelling combinations that they've already had. With spelling, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the session as well, we're really making a shift from memorizing a list of words to really understanding, do they know this code that they've been taught? So in their individual code charts, can I represent these sounds with these letter combinations? We have our writing. Yes, please, Annie, go ahead.
So the first question is, well, actually, why don't you finish going through the writing part and then I'll ask it when you're totally done. Sorry.
Perfect. So in here, we talk about there will be focusing on narrative writing. So that's all I was going to say for the writing. And then for the formative assessments, those formative assessments are going to be those daily activity book pages. And then they have a student performance task at lesson 19. Annie, did you want to ask your 2 questions?
Yeah, the first question is, we're looking at a skills unit. Is there any connection from a content perspective between what students are reading in the decodable readers and what they're working on in the knowledge strand,
No,
what they're learning. Okay, separate.
not related. Yep, we're thinking about them as two totally separate lessons.
Okay. The second is for teachers who are thinking about how to best support their multilingual learners, is guidance on that coming in individual lessons and sidebars there that provide support, or because I don't see anything here that speaks to that explicitly.
Yes, so, and we can, let me pull up a specific lesson. Every lesson has that sidebar support, which is going to be that multi-language learner support as well. And it will give you some, at least, or every lesson has at least one multilingual support. Let me pull up first grade. Skills 3. Teacher's guide. And they're going to be right here on this side for the entering, emerging, transition, expanding, and bridging.
Are there similar supports for the lessons that focus specifically on the sounds? Because I'm thinking as a multilingual learner, there are some sounds that when we hear them, they sound the same, but in theory, they are not the same. I think that that's one of the things that is more difficult for our multilingual learners when we're talking about those vowels.
Yeah, so all of the sounds are explicitly introduced, so they'll have the ability to hear it first, and then they do have those call outs of the sound oo versus you. They have explicit instruction in how to hear the difference, and they show you how to move your mouth in those.
Kevin, I have another question about the knowledge that's happening in the skills. So I noticed that in the decodables, we're reading fables, and then in writing, we're focusing on narrative writing. Is that an intentional connection? Like, are we writing fables sort of standing on the shoulders of the decodables that we're reading?
Yes. And I think, let me go to. I think for this one, they're saying what is their favorite fable that they read and then saying why, but I'd have to look at the specific writing in here. The point of this unit introduction, this is not the whole unit introduction. There is a more detailed one in the teacher's guide. The point for looking at it here is just a snapshot to say, what do teachers see when they introduce a sound? And then we'll look at it in the lesson. And so let me see the writing here. So it says that students are writing a simple narrative retelling or writing a book report in which they also encourage to write their opinion about the story that they have read. Within a skills strand, there's 4 components. There's a different amount of time spent on each of these components. So some lessons will be focused more on foundational skills. Some lessons will focus more on reading, on writing, on language, but each one of those units is going to build out these 4 specific components. Now we're going to look at lesson 12. And so this is when we introduce the sound oi. Within this lesson, we'll look at the foundational skills. So how do we introduce the sound? How do we introduce the spelling? How do we introduce the writing? How do we have the formative assessments? You can find lesson 12 on page 18 of your participant notebook. It will start here. and let's look at what is included with this lesson. So the first is, and when we're starting to teach a lesson, you want to start by looking at those primary focus objectives. Those primary focus objectives are saying, what are students going to be doing throughout this lesson? So the first is, students will review the following sound spellings: a, I, u, e, ow, ah. And so these are just reviewing the short vowels and long vowels that they already have. They've practiced these in skills 1 and skills 2. And then also reviewing these ow, the vowel digraphs that they learned in the first previous lessons. Students will hear and say the oi vowel sound at the beginning, middle, and end of the word. So this is just that phonological and phonemic awareness. Let's practice words saying oi at the beginning of a word, at the middle of a word, at the end of the word. Students will read and write one-syllable words spelled with the vowel digraph oi. So they're going to hear it, then they're going to read and write it. For reading, students will read the bag of coins with purpose and understanding and will answer literal, inferential, and evaluative questions about key details in the text. For the formative assessments, we have some anecdotal reading records of the bag of coins. We also have activity page 12.2, which is the story questions, the bag of coins. The next thing is this lesson at a glance. Remember, each one of those lessons is 60 minutes. When we're thinking about how that 60 minutes is broken up, it's helpful to think about it in components. So for 40 minutes, we're going to practice foundational skills. For 20 minutes, we're going to practice reading. When I'm thinking about the flow of my lesson, I want to be thinking about it like kind of in this group. So I can see here the first 40 minutes is all whole group. And so thinking about, do I want to have them on the carpet? Do I want to have them at their desk? In K2, there's a little bit more flexibility with that, where you want them to be, but just thinking about, where do I want my warm up? Where do I want my introducing the sound, introducing the spelling, and practicing that spelling? This also includes all of the materials that you will need. And so they'll need activity page 12.1, our large letter cards, our vowel code flip book, our spelling cards, our individual code chart. And then for reading, we'll need our readers, and then activity page 12.2. Go ahead and take a minute to read page 20 through 27 of your participant notebook, and then we'll look at that lesson and we'll kind of walk through that lesson, and then we'll watch a couple videos of the teacher teaching that lesson as well. On page 28 of your participant notebook, it's going to have some guiding questions here for the video that we're going to watch. So it just says, which strands of the rope do you see students developing? And then you can click any of these. What do you notice about the teacher's pace, and what materials did you see utilized during the lesson? Before we get to that, I do kind of want to walk through this actual lesson. And so sometimes you'll hear that this is a scripted curriculum. It is not a scripted curriculum. It is a guided curriculum. So I think about it like a recipe. It's going to have all of my ingredients. It's going to have my steps, but it's not going to have, this is exactly what needs to be said. In knowledge, there are read aloud stories that they are reading verbatim, but this is a guide for how to teach that lesson. It is helpful to really think about this. So we'll kind of break down each one of these components and think about what's included in this warm-up. So and I'm on page 20 of our participant notebook, it says the warm-up. We're going to start with that warm-up. We have those two objectives here. So the first is they're going to review the sound spellings of those short vowels and those long vowels. And then we're going to hear and say the oi sound at the beginning, middle, and end of the word. And then students will read and write one-syllable words with the vowel digraph oi. So let's start with that warm-up. The warm-up, the teacher's going to have those large letter cards. They'll have these available print and digitally. Print, they're on 8.5 by 11. Digitally, they'll have them on they can project them on the smartboard. And so the teacher, exactly. And I think a lot of times teachers can get lost in the teacher's guide. I think that there is a lot of planning that goes into this unit and into this lesson. But like for this specific warm up here, I need my large letter cards and I just need to say, what sound does this make? What sound does this make? What sound does this make? And so I can see here, the teacher's going to hold up the A, say, class, what sound does this make? Let's say it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Ah, what sound does this make? Let's say it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. A, what sound does this make? I, what sound does this make? I. So we're just going over vowel sound, the short vowels and the long vowels. Then we are going to introduce the sound oi. Now this it's pretty important, and it's also you'll notice that if you are going into some schools, some teachers may buy slideshows from Teacher Pay Teacher. They can be really cute slideshows from Teacher Pay Teacher, but there's no vetting process for these slides, and a lot of times it can almost like hinder students. And so notice here when it says the introduce the sound, this is solely a phonological and phonemic awareness. We are just listening to the sounds. And I'm going to call out why you think this might be an issue in this phonological and phonemic awareness practice. Okay, so today we're going to introduce a new sound. The sound is oi. Everybody say oi. Let's stretch it out. Oi. Let's stretch it out. Oi. And now let's say some words. And this time oi is going to be at the beginning of the word. Repeat after me. Oil, oink, oyster. What do you notice about this word oyster here? And I'm just calling this out to you as teachers, not as first grade students, but what do you notice about oyster?
The spelling is different.
Exactly. So in this, we're only spelling OI. So the first way that they are introduced to oi is OI because it's the most common spelling. Later in the year, they'll learn this OY. But sometimes I'll go into classrooms and I'll see a teacher with this beautiful slideshow and then the word oyster written in. And you're like, well, that's not the intention of this part of the lesson. The intention is to say, let's hear oi in the beginning of the word. We know these words, oink, oyster, oil. Let's hear oi in the middle of the word, coin, join, point, coil. Let's hear oi at the end of the word. And even here, we're only introducing that OI spelling. But for this phonological awareness, we can practice hearing the sound oi, joy, boy, toy, soy at the end of the word. From here, so we introduced the sound. We heard in the beginning, the middle, the end of the word. Now we're going to introduce the spelling of this word. And so when we introduce the spelling, there's a handwriting guide that it goes how to do that. So we'll say circle to the left, short line down, dot on top, oi. And then we'll practice writing it in the air a few times. We'll practice writing it on our hand. From practicing, then we would practice writing it in their activity book page. And the activity book page is, oh, they don't have the activity book page, but I'll show you what the activity book page looks like in the lesson. So the activity book page is going to be that OI that they'll practice their penmanship. And then from there, then students will have 20 minutes to read the story, The Bag of Coins. We'll watch the first part of this lesson, and then you can reflect on page 28 of your participant notebook. And so on page 28, you're thinking about which strands of the rope are students developing during this lesson? How do you know? So are they practicing on their sounds, their letters, or their words? And what did you notice about the teacher's pace? And what materials did you see utilized during the lesson? And can you just let me know that you can, and
Those lessons begin.
it's an 11-minute video, but I'll stop it throughout. And can you just let me know that you can hear this?
With a warm-up.
Today is an exciting day because we get to learn a new sound. We get to practice writing the sound and reading words with the sound. And I know how much you guys love to read a new chapter in our books, in our fables readers, so we'll get to do that today. But before we do that, let's review some of our sounds that we've already learned, okay? So when we see this, what is this sound, everyone? Ah. But when we add this, what does this make? A. Very nice. Look at this one. What is this sound? It. But when we add this, what does this team make? I. Good job. All right.
After the warm-up, the teacher explicitly introduced the sound and spelling focus of the lesson.
All right, but today we are going to learn a new sound. Are you ready? Open up your ears. The new sound we're going to learn, Stella, is the oi sound, as in oil. Can you say that sound with me? Oi. Oi. Let's stretch it out. Ready? Oi. Let's stretch it out vertically. Ready? Oi. Let's do it horizontally. Oi. And diagonally. Ready? Oi. Very nice. Let's say oi in a monster voice. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oi. Let's say it in a mouse voice. Ready? All right, one time. Good. Listen. I'm going to say some words that have oi at the beginning. And when I point to you, I want you to repeat them. Ready? Oil. Oil. Oink. Oink. Oyster. Oyster. Good. All right, that was good. We heard it at the beginning. Now, where do you think we're going to hear it, Alex? In the middle. Very nice. Ready? Repeat after me. Coin. Coin. Join. Join. Point. Point. Coil. Coil. Boil. Boil. Okay, we heard it. First sound. Middle sound, Saucy. Where's it going to be now? Last. The last sound. Kiss your brain, girl. Ready? Joy. Joy. Boy. Boy. Toy. Toy. Soy. Soy. Roy. Roy. Kiss your brains, guys. All right, now listen to this question, and I want you to stop and think before we raise our hand to answer. Watch my mouth. Oi. Now look at your neighbor, and you make the oi sound. Stella, look at Sullivan and make the oi sound, and look at her lips. Okay, cookies in your jar? Raise your hand if you can tell me if oi is a consonant sound or a vowel sound. Raise your hand if you want to share. Oh, you have to be on your bottom. Carter, what do you think?
Vowel.
Why do you think it's a vowel sound?
There's nothing blocking your airflow.
No, there's nothing blocking our airflow. Oi is a vowel sound. Kiss your brain, bud. I'm going to show you guys how to write the oi sound. Are you ready? Oh, let's see if you're right. Let's see. When we write the oi sound, we start right underneath the middle line. We circle left. We lift. We start on the middle line. Short line down. Lift. Dot on top. This is what sound, everybody? Oi
pause here and just kind of go over what we saw so far. So we saw her with the large letter cards go over these sounds that they already went over. I also tell teachers that when you are teaching this lesson, if you have students that are below grade level and do need more remediation, practice any letter sounds that you're noticing. Practice any vowel teams or vowel digraphs or whichever it might be to get in. So this foundational skills, this can be spent practicing what you see based on your classroom data. So if I know my class needs help with blends, or if I know my class needs help with digraphs, vowel or consonant, practice any specific skill here that your class would need extra practice with. This is a foundational skills warm-up. Introducing the sound. So she says we're going to practice that new sound. Let's practice it, stretching it out. Oi, oi, oi. She says in the beginning of the word, middle of the word, the end of the word. And then now what we're watching is she's going to practice spelling it. And so she's going to do the circle to the left, short line down, dot on top. I do want to call out here that there's a little less emphasis on the letter names when we're introducing the sound. This is called the sounds first approach. It is primarily in kindergarten and first grade when we're introducing these new letter combinations. And the point of this is so that students are just hearing oi, 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 and just associating this with oi. Some students can confuse those letter names and those letter sounds. And so before we get to the reading, it's not going to stress the letter name. It's obviously letter names are important, but when we're thinking about decoding a text, we're only stressing the letter sounds and not as much on the letter names. And so even when we're practicing the writing, I'm not going to say, oh, I. If the teacher does, it's not the end of the world, but it's just noticing here that the language of this teacher's guide is stressing the sounds much more than the letter names.
What color do you think it's going to be highlighted in? Oh, wait, Peter. What color? Do you think it's going to be red or green? Red or green? What do you think, Peter? You think red? But listen, Carter shared, right here, bud, on your honey. Carter shared that oi is a vowel sound. Because was there anything obstructing our airflow? So Peter, when your mom's at a red light and there's nothing telling her to slow down, what color is the light? Green. Green. Green means go, right? There's nothing stopping her airflow. So we are going to activate this sound. Isla, you can come sit right here. We're going to activate this sound in green today. And if we
When students are introduced to a sound, they activate or unlock that sound. Vowels are going to be green, consonants are going to be red, and R controlled are going to be blue.
look at this sample word. I don't want anybody to shout it out. I want you, when you see it, to hold it in your brain. All right, everybody, you know about the power bar. But are we learning about the other
This
ways
is when
to
she
spell
talks
the
about
oi
that
sound
power
today?
bar.
No.
Oh, let me
Spelling for oi, but there must be another way to spell the oi sound. But are we learning about the other way to spell the oi sound today? No. No, we're just learning about this spelling, O-I. I've activated oi in my code chart, but we need to go back and activate it in ours. When you go back to your seats, you're going to take out your oi.
So then students go back to their seats. And then once they go back to their seats, this is when they activate it in their individual code charts. And so they'll see that word oi, they'll trace it in green, and they now know that spelling for oi.
Practice writing OI.
This is that activity page 12.1. So they're practicing circle to the left, dot on top. This is the front of it.
And words that can finally words contain
And this is the back of it. And so they'd represent the coin, coil, point.
containing OI and match those words in correspondence that they have just learned.
I want to pause here. So that was the first 40 minutes of that lesson. So just to kind of go over those 40 minutes, Yes, perfect. Annie, I'll get, let me go over
Yeah,
this.
do that.
I'll ask for your question. So that first 40 minutes, the 10 minutes on the warm up, reviewing the letter sounds that we know, introducing the sound audibly by hearing it, introducing the spelling for 15 minutes, circle to the left. That's when they're going to work on their, our circle to the left, dot on top, our short line down, dot on top, and then they're practicing in their individual code charts, and then they'll practice spelling it for 10 minutes. So questions about what those first 40 minutes of instruction included?
Can you take me back to that activity page for a second?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me just pull it up on. The front or back?
More the back, but is this activity page happening in an independent way when students are at their desk, or is this guided?
So this could be, it's that flexibility. So the teacher, if the teacher during that 10 minutes wants it to be more teacher-led, more independent, more groups, and so it can be any one of those three. This is that flexibility of the teacher can absolutely have it be more independent. It could be more teacher guided.
Okay. Part of the reason I'm asking is because I think I feel slightly surprised that there's not more reading of words that contain the target sound before kids are released. So you're saying in this part, scroll down to the back page for a second, a teacher could choose to take these words and actually work through blending the sounds to decode the word before kids are set off to then write those words with the spelling. Like
Correct.
that's a choice the teacher could make.
Correct.
Okay.
And then a follow-up question to that. So all of these words are decodable for kids in theory?
Correct.
Okay. And then, because one thing that I've seen in classrooms is teachers will be like, it's kids copying, right, the words down, but that is the purpose of it. It's just practicing forming the letters for the sound. Or
Well,
is it reading to match to that? Because I feel like this can get a little bit tricky, and I've seen it implemented in multiple ways of we're just like simply matching and writing without the like comprehending. This first word is coin, so which of these pictures represents coin? Okay, what sound do we hear? Now let's practice spelling the sound. Just because it's open to interpretation in the curriculum, and so yeah, I've just seen it multiple ways introduced. I'm like, what is the true intent here? Is it literally just like seeing another example, but in a word with some comprehension with it, or is there another purpose?
I think like you were saying, but you're saying that you're seeing it not being used to that purpose?
Just as like a simple, like kids are just watching the teacher write coin below coin and then copying that
No, the point, yeah,
whole
the
group.
point is to have practice. What sounds is this? Oi, coin, oi, point, and then going over this. Okay, which one of those words is coin? So decoding the words and then matching the words. Any other questions on that first 40 minutes of foundational skills?
I have one question, and you may not know the answer to this, but in terms of the design of this experience, especially given that it's an intro to the sound lesson, do you have any context like how the decision was made to move straight from the phonemic awareness component, phonological phonemic awareness component, straight to encoding versus building in some at-bats with making the connection just to visually seeing the oi pattern and having them touch and say, like, touch and say the sound, or to like actually have some decoding practice with that pattern before moving into the spelling piece?
You're saying, why are they practicing writing it before they're practice decoding it?
Yes.
I'm not sure on that actual, they have something called the literacy house. And so the literacy house is going to say that they're going to practice each of these. I think this is more penmanship than like encode, because encoding would be like coin. What sounds
Right.
different? So this is, I think, more penmanship than encoding. That would be my guess, because I know they have something called the Literacy House where it kind of walks through that phonological awareness, basic phonics, advanced phonics, and then the encoding of it. So like that is the progression. They wouldn't have spelling words with this oi until later in the year.
Thank you.
Let's reflect on that participant notebook. Let me turn there. So in the first part, what did we notice about the teachers? Well, let's start here. Which strands of the rope do you see being developed in the K2 skills? For those first 40 minutes, what did we see being developed? Knowledge, vocabulary, sentences, reasoning, mental model, sounds, letters, words.
Blue part.
Say that again.
The blue part, so sounds, letter, words.
Exactly. So in skills, we're really focusing on these parts here. So we're focusing on those sounds, those letters, and those words. Anybody want to share out, what did you notice about the teacher's pace, and what materials did you see utilized during the lesson?
I'll answer the second part first. I saw her using the sound cards. And she was also using, though I couldn't see it super clearly, I think she had some sort of lined paper on a whiteboard type of thing that she was using to model letter formation. Then she was sending them off to get into their own code books, I believe, in that activating portion. Those are the ones that I caught.
Yep, fantastic. And those are those materials, so the same materials that we saw up here. So those large letter cards, the vowel code flipbook, that is what the teacher is going to be using. The individual code chart, that's what the students have. So this is just the teacher's version. It's the larger version. One, she's going to unlock or activate it in her version, and then the individual code chart, the students would do that in theirs. The green marker for the vowels being green. The spelling card is what she's going to put on the vowel code flipbook when we activate or unlock that sound. And then the students are in their activity page 12.1. All right, let's watch the reading portion of this lesson. And actually, we'll go over the reading portion first and talk about what to expect. So in that reading portion, students will read the bag of coins with purpose and understanding, and will answer literal, inferential, and evaluative questions about key details in the text. They're going to practice reading that bag of coins. I want to call out here when we're introducing those sounds that we've learned. Notice the last sound that we learned, ow. There's more practice of that. In that first reading, there's going to be 1 or 2 words with that oi or that new sound. And so they can practice reading it. In following stories, they'll have more practice of that oi sound. But in that first introduction, it's going to be 1 or 2 words. And then we have those tricky words. So the teacher's going to go over these words. Teacher's going to have them practice. So we'll say, all right, the sound we learned yesterday is ow. I want us to tap this out. What word is this? Let's say it on the count of 3. What word is this? Let's say it on the count of 3. Let's look at these tricky words. Now, not all of this word is tricky, but what's this tricky part? So she'll introduce this. She'll introduce the core vocabulary, the foot of the tree, and a bad spot. And then, so that's 5 minutes, and then 15 minutes to practice reading. It recommends having groups. And when it says groups, thinking about your class kind of in 2 groups, students that need more support and students that can be more independent, not splitting it 50-50. So you don't want a group of 12 kids over here and 12 kids over here, but just thinking in terms of what are the students that I need to check in with first, and then who are the students that can be more independent. And then students are going to, if they're in group 1, they're going to read the story and practice this independently, or that they would reread it with you and practice it with you. I'm going to show the last few minutes of that video.
This will also give them a chance to practice important reading comprehension skills.
All right, boys and girls, today we're going to read a new story called The Bag of Coins. And this story is about two people who go on a trip together. If you've ever been on a trip, put your hands on your head. So these two people go on a trip together, but they find something. They actually find a bag of coins. So before we read, let's look up here. And we are going to preview some of the words in our chart. So right now, I want everybody to take a second to look at these words. I'm going to call on different people to read them. Ready? Sullivan, eyes up here, big girl. Sullivan, eyes up here. Try to read them in your brain. All right, ready? Isabel, all of these words have what sound? Ow. Ow. So what's this first word, Isabel? Found. Very good. What sound is this, Alex?
Oi.
Oi. Very nice. Let's, on the count of 3, read this word together. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Coins.
Oh, we definitely need to know how to read that word, since the title of our story is called The Bag of Coins. And we have this list of tricky words that we just need to refresh our brains. Ready? Let's read them together. Who,
That,
what, my, all. Very nice. So we're going to see these words in our reader. But before we read today's story, I want to introduce you guys into some phrases that you may have already heard before. So one phrase you're going to hear in today's story is the foot of a tree. And so when I show you this picture, this is the foot. Today, the way we're going to read is that I'm going to work with a few of you at the blue table, and then I'm going to partner you guys up. So all right, guys, so I'm going to ask you guys some questions. What does one man discover while...
And then she goes over the comprehension questions that are included in the teacher's guide. And those questions are right here. All right. So let's go over the materials, and then we'll review what was included in that second part of the lesson. So on page 63, and I can turn there, but you'll see all of the materials for skills, and I'll just kind of go over what all those materials are. So the first is teacher's guides. These are available both print and digitally. Blending cards, these are in kindergarten only. You can see here that kindergarten. This is to help students with those letter sounds. And these are, again, available print and digitally. Sounds posters and sounds cards in kindergarten. As they learn a new sound, they'll have that sound poster and that sound card. Large letter cards, that is what we saw the teachers using to practice that, that phonics. We have our consonant and vowel code flip books. Those are what students will have to practice their activating their sounds. Their spelling cards, their big books. Big books are just the larger copy of the reader. Their activity books, and those activity books they have available print and digitally. Their readers, print and digitally. The nice thing about the activity books is, like I was saying earlier, students can talk into them to record themselves. So that is an accommodation. And the nice thing about the readers is they can be read aloud. You can choose the pace to be fast, normal, or slower. They also have chaining folders for kindergarten, picture readers, and the individual code chart for first and second grade. I'm going to scroll back up to that second part of the lesson. Okay. In the second part of the lesson, what materials did we see the teacher using?
she had created the sound chart with the words to review and the tricky words. So she had that on the board.
Yep. And so the teacher can create it as an anchor chart, and they also have them available to be projected. So it's more so just if the teacher wants to have them displayed so that the students can look at them throughout the day, or just digitally. So thank you. What other materials did the teacher use?
Reader.
Yep. And those readers, fantastic. Let me see. We'll go over this in about like 3 minutes. Once we go over these materials, we'll take a little bit of a brain break. So these are those large letter cards. So the teacher used those to introduce or go over those letters. The individual code chart, this is what students have when they're going to activate those sounds in green, vowels green, consonants red, and R controlled blue. The teacher also went over that power bar and said, now this is the most common spelling for that sound, oi, but we know later we're going to learn a different spelling for that sound, oi. They practice writing, and then they have those decodable readers. I do want to call out here that those readers notice the sound, and this is not for the specific reader that they were looking at, but this is just an example. Those sounds here that they are practicing are bold, and those tricky words are underlined. So in the word the, like I was talking about earlier, the E is tricky because it's not the, and even the word a is considered tricky because they learn a by itself as a, and so the word a is considered tricky. You might not think of it as a tricky word because it's just one letter, but it is considered tricky. These are kindergarten. This is their first reader. They have this in skills 6, and then this is their end of unit kindergarten reader. I want you to look at the end of year kindergarten and the beginning of year first grade. So look at the end of year complexity for kindergarten. What do you notice about the beginning of year for first grade?
We have complete sentences, but a small number of them on each page.
Yep. And it's going to be less advanced than the end of year kindergarten. So it's accounting for if students haven't picked up much reading over the summer. And so first grade and second grade, those first 2 units are just a review of everything they learned in the previous year. So even if students didn't have CKLA instruction the year before, it's just a review. And this is the end of year first grade reader. This is the beginning of year second grade reader, and the end of year, or the last reader in the last unit. They also have this code load. That code load, we know that there are 150 spellings for those 44 sounds. And so this is saying by the beginning of this reader, how many of those sound spelling correspondences they will have known. By the end of it, how many they will have known. So that code is really important so that the teachers can see what exactly do students need for this to be considered decodable. And it's actually included in the reader. This is for the teacher's reference, not necessarily for the students, but it has every single vowel spelling and every single consonant spelling. And I don't know if you can see that. I can zoom in a little bit, but it will show you here the sounds. I is in skim, is in bed. And it also has like the sound to be spelled with a C or a K or a CK or a CC. So it shows you all of those spellings. It includes the punctuation and all of the tricky words. So this is really helpful because for this reader to be considered decodable, it means that they need to know all of these sounds and these tricky words. I also want to go over the difference between English and Spanish. And so in English, there are 26 letters, but there are 44 sounds. There are 5 vowels with at least 14 sounds, and the pronunciation is difficult to predict. In Spanish, it's more of a transparent, Orthography, there's 27 letters with 22 to 24 sounds. There's 5 vowels with 5 sounds, and the pronunciation is easier to predict for the K2 skills strand. True or false? Students read from different readers depending on their independent reading level. True or false? Anybody want to come off mute? Yes, false. Fantastic. True or false? All skills strand lesson segments should be taught in order. When we're thinking about the order of a lesson. True. Fantastic. Okay, let's take 1 minute, jot down a question or a wondering you have, and then why don't we answer the questions after the break? Why don't we take our 10-minute break now, and then we'll once we come back, then we will go over those questions. I'm going to put a 10-minute timer on, and then we will come back in 10 minutes. You can turn your camera off and mute yourself. What is a question that you have or a wondering that you have about K2 skills?
I can kick us off, Kevin. I'm wondering what range of options teachers have when they're supporting students or guiding students on how to read the decodable. So we saw the teacher in the video pull a group with her, and we saw her put the rest of the class in pairs. What other moves are they encouraged to make or are available to them to make, and how students actually read that text?
Absolutely. So we want to push students to as much of it as independently reading as possible, but the teacher can chunk it up into pages. And so it could be independent, and the teacher can do it by page number. And so the teacher can read the page and then have the students read the page. It could be a partner. It could be a small group. It could be more teacher-led or more independent. And the teacher's guide will kind of show you those options. And so for this specific lesson, it said group 1, group 2, but the next lesson it might be independent or more teacher-led. So there's a few different options for what those reading lessons look like. Any other wonderings or questions about that K2 skills strand?
How much emphasis should teacher during the reading part of the lessons, how much emphasis should be on the like knowledge comprehension side while also doing the decoding?
Absolutely. So for this specific lesson, let me scroll up a little bit. These are the application questions and the comprehension questions that go with it. So we still want to put, oh, no, I'm sorry, let me scroll up. I'm in the knowledge lesson. These are the comprehension questions that go with that particular story. And so the teachers can walk them through. What does one man discover while he's on a trip with a friend? How does the other man feel after the first man finds the bag of coins? So they have those literal, inferential, evaluative questions.
So when I'm thinking about like that part of the lesson, I'm towards the end of my hour-long block. I'm just noting, and because I see the like observation discussion questions, like I'm noting where students are struggling maybe, or like what level they're comprehending, to then go back and in small group maybe do a little more investigation on where the decoding skills are that prohibited their comprehension part of it, because it seems like, you know, a few students are going to get to be able to answer that out loud. With
In
that part,
you're saying, how do they share out if they know this?
because it says call on different students, I'm just thinking about like the volume of kids that are going to have a chance to answer that whole class.
Absolutely. In the
Mhm.
video, and we didn't watch the full video, but she assigns a peanut butter and jelly partner, and that's who they turn and talk with. And so each student talks about it, and then she calls on 2 or 3 students.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, let's go ahead and start with the knowledge. And so we looked at the K2 skills. Now we will look at the knowledge strand. Now in knowledge, we are talking about how do we build vocabulary? How do we build content knowledge, sentencing, mental models? Again, this is becoming increasingly strategic. I want you to take a minute to read through this passage, and then I'm going to ask you some comprehension questions. So take a minute. Now, this is a 4th grade reading passage, but we're going to talk about it in the context of K2 knowledge. First question, relatively easy. What sport is this about? Either come off mute or write it in the chat. What sport is this about? Baseball. Is the word baseball in this passage? No. So how are we able to determine that this is baseball? Your schema, you're able to infer, you're able to make a mental model, right? You've probably seen baseball, either you've been to a baseball game, you've seen it on TV, you have some sort of understanding of baseball. If this was about cricket or about rugby, I might not be as familiar, you might not be as familiar, and so you don't know, you aren't able to kind of make that mental model. The second question is, it's a little bit trickier, but I want you to think about who is the pitcher, and you can come off mute or write it in the chat. Who is the pitcher? Clarison, fantastic. How do you know Clarison is the pitcher?
The ball is returned to the pitcher.
Exactly. The ball is returned, so that means that he had the ball. Fantastic. Now, I want you to think about, who do you think would be able to comprehend this story best? Group 1, strong readers with no prior knowledge of baseball. Group 2, struggling or reluctant readers with prior knowledge of baseball. Or group 3, do you think that they both perform the same? Who do you think would be able to comprehend? I have maybe one person come off mute and share their thoughts. I'm seeing some 2s in the chat. Any thoughts on why do you think that struggling or reluctant readers with prior knowledge of baseball?
There are a lot of references within the passage to things that are very specific. So you need the context to understand what's going on and know a little bit about the rules of baseball to understand what's going on.
Absolutely. And that word comprehend, right? Who is able to make a mental model? Who is able to kind of visualize what's happening here? Same thing. If this was about rugby, I'd have no idea what's happening. And that doesn't mean that I can't read those words. I can't comprehend. I can't make a mental model. I can't think about what's happening there. So fantastic. Now, this study was given to students, and these students were placed into groups based on their reading level and their knowledge of baseball. To no surprise, students that had had high reading skills and a lot of knowledge about baseball scored at the highest percent accuracy, at about 86% accuracy. Students that had low reading skills and low knowledge of baseball scored at about 43% accuracy. But I want you to look at these 2 here. Students that had high reading skills but low knowledge of baseball scored only 10% higher than students that were low readers and low knowledge of baseball. But students that had low reading skills but high knowledge of baseball scored only 5% less than students that were high readers and high knowledge of baseball. If the text, yes, Annie, exactly. So if, absolutely, this is a very technical thing where it's talking about like the shortstop, the windup, all of these things that you're like, I don't really conceptually understand here. So what does this tell us? This tells us that background knowledge when we are reading is so important. It helps us make an understanding of what's going on around us. So we want to be intentional about building content knowledge. This is CKLA's content knowledge from kindergarten through 5th grade. You can see here in teal how literature developed. So in 5th grade, students are reading poetry and The Adventures of Don Quixote and A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I want you to think about, how does poetry and Shakespeare become a little bit more easier to understand if we have contemporary fiction and classic tales and fairy tales and fables and stories? We have this framework. And so when we're reading A Midsummer Night's Dream, we're not thinking about it as, where is this taking place historically, geographically? What is this literature? We have this framework because it's all built around itself. Same thing with science. So science connections, we're learning about the human body and then geology and then chemical matter. So all of these things that we're building on it throughout the year and from year to year. There are a diverse books and experiences incorporated as well from kindergarten through 5th grade. So there are a lot of different perspectives and from a variety of authors. So culturally responsive literature and topics: Celia Cruz, Shirley Chisholm, Billie Jean King, Lin-Manuel Miranda. In K2 knowledge, same thing with skills. All of these materials are available both print and digitally. We're going to jump into a 1st grade knowledge lesson. I want to show you what the platform looks like. So on the digital experience, this is the teacher or educator platform. It will include the lesson brief. It will have your lesson objectives, those primary focus objectives. You can see that lesson on page 29 of your participant notebook. It's also going to include that formative assessment. So what is the primary focus objective? What's the assessment? That lesson at a glance, it looks very similar to the skills lesson at a glance. With knowledge, though, every knowledge lesson follows that same flow. So it's always going to be 10 minutes to introduce the read aloud. That introducing the read aloud is going to be connecting to prior knowledge, introducing vocabulary. 30 minutes for the read aloud. Now, it is an interactive read aloud, so there are questions embedded throughout and questions throughout after the reading. And then 20 minutes for an application. So it's always going to follow that 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes. So the flow of this becomes pretty uniform and teachers become pretty familiar with how to embed this. Whereas I think in K2 skills, pacing can be a little tricky because foundational skills might be 10 minutes on Monday, but then it might be 15 minutes on Tuesday. So the pacing for skills can be, those lessons look different each day, but the pacing in knowledge is that following that same flow. So for the introducing the read aloud, like we were talking about, connecting to what we already learned. So if we're on lesson 5, let's talk about what did we learn in lessons 1 through 4. And then also introducing that vocabulary. During the read aloud, we're going to set that purpose for listening. What are we listening to? We'll do a little bit of a deep dive of the goose and the golden egg. We have those comprehension questions and then that word work for greedy. And then the application is that formative formative assessment. On page 38 of your participant notebook, you have another reflection there. Which strands of the rope are you seeing students develop? And what materials did you see during this lesson? Now I'm going to jump into that lesson. This is in 1st grade. Show me a thumbs up if you've explored Amplify's website before. Have you looked at the teacher materials? Thumbs up if you have explored, thumbs down if you have not. Okay. So just a little bit of an overview. So teachers will have access to their particular grades. We have all of our skills units here. You can click that unit and it will have all of it for skills 1. So all of your materials for skills 1 are in there. Let me go back. And then I'm going to do knowledge 1, but like we have all of our knowledge domains here. So this is knowledge 1. We have our unit introduction. So we have that same introduction that we have. We're going to skip the introduction for this and just jump right into that lesson to kind of see what's included with this lesson. And then all of the materials. So we have our teacher's guide, our activity books, the flip books. The flip books, these are what the teacher is projecting while teaching the lesson. The image cards, this is going to be any images to help build background knowledge. So in today's lesson, we'll talk about what is a goose. Geese lay eggs. How are geese helpful? What do they provide? And then the lessons themselves. So if I click lesson 3, from this lesson, like we were just looking at, we have those primary focus objectives. That lesson at a glance is going to be a preview of what's included in these slides. The lesson at a glance, advanced preparation, the vocabulary, and I'm going to jump into this lesson. Now you'll notice here that there are teacher notes. And so the nice thing about it is that if the teacher splits their screen, the teacher can teach from the computer, and they have these notes here. So these notes are going to include the questions that you should ask embedded throughout. It's the same thing that's in that print teacher's guide. Okay, I'm going to click start class. All right, and then I'll just go through this, not like the full 1-hour lesson, but we'll just look at how do we introduce vocabulary? How do we do the read aloud? All right, today's lesson is lesson 3, the goose and the golden egg. Now, let's go over our objectives. Repeat after me. I can answer questions about the characteristics of fables, including the characters, plot, setting, and moral. So over the last few days, we've been talking about the characters, we've been talking about the plot, we've been talking about the setting, and we've been talking about the moral. So in our story today, we're going to think about those same things. All right, repeat after me. I can identify and explain the moral of a fable. Repeat after me. I can demonstrate an understanding of the word greedy. And the last one, I can identify the beginning, middle, and end of a fable. Now we have some vocabulary words. I want you to repeat them after me. Delight. Delight is a great pleasure or happiness. An example of delight is going to my grandparents' house for a visit is always a delight. Everyone say that word delight again. When we hear the word delight in our story, I want you to show me your elephant ears. So when we hear that word delight, next word is golden. Everyone say golden. Golden. Golden is made of gold. The king sipped from a golden cup. What's that second word? Exactly, golden. That last word, greedy. Everyone say greedy. Greedy means wanting more than you need or deserve. The king was a greedy man and wanted lots of gold. Now, let's talk about those 3 words again. So when we hear delight, what are we going to do? When we hear golden, what are we going to do? When we hear greedy, what are we going to do? Fantastic. Now, let's talk about what did we learn yesterday? And so we didn't have this story yesterday, but we'd go over that question. What story did we read yesterday? Exactly, The Maid and the Milk Pail. Now, I want us to think about, in that story, The Maid and the Milk Pail, was this about a shepherd boy that lied to his family? No, I want you to turn and talk. What was The Maid and the Milk Pail about? And I can put this screen over here. This is where I'm looking at the notes for this lesson. But what would be projected for students is this right here. And there's a few questions in the teacher's guide to go over Who was the main character? Did the milk end up being useful to the girl? What lesson or what moral was learned in this story? Fantastic. All right. Well, in today's story, we're going to be introduced to a goose. I want you to think, what does a goose provide to people? Turn and talk with your neighbor. What does a goose provide to people? Exactly. A goose can provide eggs. Anything else? A goose can also provide feathers. Yep, exactly. Fantastic. Now, let's start our reading, The Goose and the Golden Egg. Now, in today's story, we're going to listen closely to the fable to find out what is the moral of this story. What is the author trying to teach us in this story? This is a video intended for if a student is absent, so the teacher can show this. It is a read aloud, but we encourage teachers to read the story aloud. I'm not going to read the whole story, but we will go over it and I'll kind of get to the first vocabulary word. All right. Once a farmer went to the nest of his goose and found there was an egg, all yellow and shiny. When he picked it up, it was heavy as a rock. He was about to throw it away because he thought that someone was playing a trick on him. Now, I want to ask you a question. Why does the farmer think the egg is not a goose egg? Exactly, because it was yellow and shiny. But on second thought, he took it home and discovered to his delight. Exactly, and then now we talk about delight. What does that word mean? Great happiness. Now it says that the farmer was filled with delight, that he had delight. Why do you think that he'd be so happy? Okay, we will pause there, but you get the point of like when we're going to build vocabulary in context, we have our discussion questions, we have our activity book page. I do want to call out here for this. The students can record themselves, and this is an accommodation. This is also available in 3rd through 5th grade as well. This is really helpful to help develop their writing, because if we think about the writing process, I can develop my sentences and build those out from one day to the next. And then also the nice thing is that it stores all of it for you. So you don't have to think about like, oh, they sent this home and finished it at home, or they did this here and I lost that activity page. And it's all stored in the student home. And so when we think about if we're building writing from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they have access to yesterday. So if we think about who are the characters, who are the setting, what happened in the beginning, middle, and end, it's all stored for them. And then let's see. This is when they'd have this is their activity page for the beginning, middle, and end. Again, available both print and digitally. I'm going to pause here. And I know that that was a very quick kind of overview of the knowledge lesson. Let me close out of here. Close out of here. And discuss on page 38, which strands of the rope are students developing during this lesson? Which strands of that rope? Anybody want to share out?
Language comprehension.
Language comprehension, fantastic. So we're talking about building background knowledge. So in this one, we're talking about fables and stories. We're building out that vocabulary. So we're thinking about the word delight. We're thinking about golden. We're thinking about mental modeling. We're thinking about this read aloud. The students do not have this story in front of them. It is a read aloud. Some teachers are wondering, why isn't this story that they have in front of them? It's above grade level text. And so students' listening comprehension is greater than their reading comprehension. Let's look at the materials for K2 knowledge. And this is,
Kevin, can I ask you one additional question?
please.
So in this particular unit, the knowledge that you're trying to build is not the knowledge of the particular, like the lasting knowledge that you're trying to keep with kids is not the particular morals that are revealed by each.
So this one would just be on like understanding literature. And so it's just going over fables and stories and saying that like fables have animals, fables have morals, fables have
Right.
kind of like it's going over those basic characteristics of fables and stories.
Okay, so it's the knowledge is mostly focused on the genre and what literary elements are making it that genre.
Sometimes. So like, but for example, they also learn about astronomy. So there's not like that specific genre in that they learn.
Right, it's just meaning in this particular one.
Yep. So it depending on if it's literature or history or science, they're learning about, but like for this one, they're all standalone fables, but in other units like animals and habitats, they learn about the content and become an expert in animal habitats and what bird habitats look like and what mammal habitat looks like. So, but
I'm curious.
Yes.
Oh, I'm curious what guidance you provide people when they're like, because I've seen it one way where teachers read like you are and pause and ask the questions with the picture up. And then I've seen it where they'll play like a video from YouTube that has the picture, but then somebody else reading it. Is there guidance that you provide people around like really stick with this or yeah.
Yeah, so we always say like if you go to library class and you heard the librarian playing an audiobook, you'd be like, what are we doing? Same thing with reading, like it is our job to instruct them in that. There is a time and place for videos, but we encourage this as an interactive read aloud. We should be reading it to the students. So that's kind of our stance on that. Those research, I think sometimes teachers see because there is a video embedded in this, and I don't know why they embedded. I wish they didn't put it in the slides, but that's me. But that is really, if a student is absent, they have access to that video. But sometimes the teachers will go in and they'll just click the 4-minute video, but then the students aren't paying attention and then they're not building the content knowledge. It's supposed to be an interactive part where I'm expecting all students to turn and talk with their neighbor. I'm expecting all students to say this word greedy. When we hear this word greedy, and the thing with it in K2 knowledge, students are practicing vocabulary that they probably can't read or spell, but they can hear it, understand it, and apply it. And so, and they can also say it in a sentence. That's what that word work activity is. If I'm just having a video being played, then it's kind of like I'm not actually teaching the lesson. So that's the stance on that. It should be more of a teacher-led interactive read aloud. So for the
I have one, sorry,
Please.
I have one more question. Maybe you're going to get to this, or there might be something that I'm missing, but I was sort of following along in the lesson plan as you were guest teaching for us, and it seemed like you did a lot of things that weren't in the lesson plan. And so I'm wondering, maybe I don't see it, but I'm wondering what is the alignment between the lesson plans and the digital materials? And if those aren't completely aligned, what is the guidance we give teachers on which one to use? Like, for example, I don't see previewing vocabulary in the lesson plan, unless I'm missing it somewhere.
It is that this is just the snapshot, but it is embedded in the lesson plan, and it had you'll see it in the teacher's guide. It will show you the exact, the word, the context, because that is in the teacher's guide. I think it's just they didn't include it in this snapshot of the lesson. I don't know why they didn't put it in there, but the alignment is the same. So all of those notes that I'm reading from, they're copy and pasted from the teacher's guide.
Okay, so this in our guide for today's purposes, this snapshot that we see, I think starting on page 29 is not the full lesson plan from the teacher's guide.
Correct. Let me pull up here and show you lesson 3. Here you go. So this is when you introduce the core vocabulary: delight, great pleasure, or happiness. And this is what I was reading from. It looks like this on their end. So they just didn't include this page in your participant notebook for today.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And were there any other things that you thought that I added that you didn't see in the teacher's guide?
The questions within, so I'm on page 33 of our participant guide. And I was just wondering where you were getting the questions that you embedded within the read aloud.
So they're those ones that are highlighted in gray.
Okay.
And they're highlighted in gray in the what I read as well. I can show you. Let me pull up lesson 3. Right here.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then we didn't do the full lesson just for the sake of timing, but once I finish that reading loud, and I'm asking these questions that are already included in here, notice that with that vocabulary, we're going back and saying like, okay, that word greedy. I've always found that teachers want to, when we introduce the vocabulary, they want to put 10 different pictures here of the word delight, and they want to have 8 different pictures of golden. That's actually not what this introduction of vocabulary is intended to be. It is to say, let's listen for these 3 words. This is what these 3 words mean. When we get to it in context of this story, now let's think about, what does this word delight mean? What does this word golden mean? What does this word greedy mean in context of the story? Because then the students are making the meaning of that definition. The students are applying it to the context, and then the students can apply it to context outside of that story. So that's how we build the vocabulary. Whereas if I just show them 8 pictures of the word greedy, I'm doing that work for greedy. And so they're not expected to think of what it means in that context as much. And so to have vocabulary be in their long-term memory, not just in their short-term, we want to make sure that they have that opportunity to apply it. All right, let's see here. So for those materials, we have the image cards. The image cards are going to be to help build background knowledge. So this can be like for today's story, it talks about what's a goose, what's an egg, what are feathers, and those are available both print and digital. The nice thing about these is because they are available print, I tell teachers like make a content wall. So in this unit, that's 15 lessons, build out your content knowledge so we can see when we get to lesson 5, what do we talk about in lessons 1 through 4? Have vocabulary words, have flipbook images. The flipbook images are from the story. So this is what's being displayed as the teacher is reading those. But staple up a flipbook image, staple up an activity book page, staple up a vocabulary word, just so that we can see here and it doesn't feel like 15 isolated lessons, but really lesson 1, build to lesson 2, build to lesson 3. And then those activity books, the activity books are available both print and digitally. Okay, let's pause here. Any wonderings, questions about K2 knowledge?
I'm thinking about the recording accommodation and the writing discussion we had earlier about like students having a chance to do the writing in different genres. in the knowledge strand and how it's about like building their the content of what they're writing. And so is there guidance around, okay, do the recording, but then like work with students on them taking their recording and putting it to print? Or like how much of an accommodation is that versus like people are just using it as a shortcut and then kids are not getting strong writing instruction because that's available?
Absolutely. So we definitely don't encourage it to be used every day, but in the process of that writing process, so thinking about like, okay, if I'm planning on Monday and then writing it on Tuesday, I can listen to the planning that I did on Monday and then write on Tuesday. So that's kind of the intention of it. But it is a feature that is available all the time. And so I'm not sure exactly how teachers are using it, but the intention is to be a scaffold, not a full something that should be used every single day. Any other wonderings, thoughts, questions? All right, let's look at 3rd through 5th grade. I want you to take a minute to read this passage and we will talk about the importance of vocabulary. Okay, in this passage, we took out tier 2 and tier 3 words. Do you feel like you have an understanding of what is going on here? No. And so what is the point of this? The point is to say that in CKLA, we are very intentional about introducing vocabulary. So like we were talking about, even in K2 knowledge, first graders are learning the word deciduous. They're learning all of these words. Why is this important? So when they get to 3rd through 5th grade, and now they can decode these words, their content knowledge and their vocabulary is already up because they've been intentionally building it for the last few years. Now I'm going to show some tier 2 words and also tier 3 words. Again, some of these vocabulary words are tricky, like the word remote. Is this a remote controller? No, this is talking about one of the remote places. And so just thinking about when we introduce vocabulary, we want to be intentional, not shy away from it and say, this is too advanced for my students, but be intentional. So in these units, thinking about ancient Rome, it's not something that they have this vocabulary word once and never see it again. They're going to become experts in it because they're studying it for 15 days. So when they introduce a vocabulary word, it's not expected that they learn and master it that first time, but through repeated exposure through different contexts. There are a lot of opportunities for reading. So they have their readers, they have read works. These are supplemental passages. These are available. There's almost one for every lesson that goes along with the particular lesson. And so this is something that would happen outside of class time, but I tell teachers, like during intervention, they can have students go on to read works or the teacher can print them. Excuse me, they could also be for substitute, if a substitute and I just want to have them go over certain things. The trade books there's one trade book that goes with each unit. The trade books are just to help supplement any background knowledge or content knowledge. There are quests in grades 3 through 5. So quests are going to be a more interactive. So these are actually switched. In 3rd grade, it is the Viking unit. In 4th grade, it is Eureka. And in 5th grade, it's A Midsummer Night's Dream. And like we were talking about earlier, it is from diverse experiences and diverse perspectives. There are supplemental novel guides in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I read all of these books. They're all so cute. Stella Diaz has something to say is about a 3rd grade girl that doesn't feel like her English is good enough, but she doesn't feel like her Spanish is good enough. And so it's just her struggling with like not feeling like she has mastered either of those languages. The Science of Breakable Things is so cute and adorable. I mean, I love all of these books, but there are novel guides that go along with each of these books. But let's talk about the 3rd through 5th grade program overview. So one is using print-only materials. Print-only materials would be that reader, the print reader, the print activity books. This would be helpful for students that work best with print. And it's a hard thing because students or teachers have the option to choose print or digital. We want to encourage digital because a lot of the standardized assessments that students will be working on for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade are digital. And so we want some sort of tech proficiency, but it really is a teacher's preference. And so maybe it's one unit they do more print, one unit they do more digital, but just pushing teachers to know that how to navigate the digital materials is important. There's also a completely digital option. That would be the teachers projecting it through the digital experience, which we'll look at. The students are all logged onto their computer, so their activity books, their readers, they're using on their computer. Why would we use this model? So that you and the students are comfortable navigating technology, limits the use of print materials. You could teach it remotely, and you want students to do work asynchronously. So the teacher could assign this lesson, or the teacher can do the live lesson. And we'll walk through a live lesson in just a minute. Then there's the integrated approach, which would have both print and digital. And so maybe the students are working together on a computer, still using some print and digital copies. We encourage this because it's just making use of both. And so maybe on Monday, they'll use the print readers, but on Tuesday, they'll use the digital readers. We just want to encourage tech, pushing tech, but also understanding that students having the opportunity to write on paper pencil is also very important. So those print materials, they are the teacher's guide, and then the digital materials would be the digital experience. With that digital experience, notice here that this is what is displayed on the teacher screen. This is what is displayed on the student screen and also on the smartboard. Within 3rd through 5th grade, there's 4 components here. One is speaking and listening. Speaking and listening is going to be that read aloud, but it's not just me reading aloud, it's also them speaking as well. So it's, can they respond to the text? Reading, writing, and language. So let's go ahead and look at a lesson. This is going to be from 3rd grade, Unit 6. It starts on page 39 of your participant notebook. It is the wedding feast. We're not going to do a full lesson deep dive of it, but I do want to show you kind of what's available within CKLA. So let's go over the primary focus objectives. So they have one for reading. Students will make and confirm predictions about the concluding events in a story. Students will answer questions about a text and explicitly cite the text as the basis for their answer. Writing, students will compare and contrast 2 characters from Norse mythology and plan a short narrative about one character. And language, students will categorize using different spellings for the pattern s. So their spelling words will all have the sound s and those different spellings. We have our formative assessments, the wedding feast, and the character comparison. Oh, and I see some in the chat. Is what an additional purchase to the core program?
Sorry, this is back when you were talking about novels study.
Sorry, I didn't realize that I missed the chat for that long. Yes, the novels are supplemental. Those are not a part of the core program, but they are an additional. Schools can, and we encourage schools to use them just because they have them available, but the schools would have to purchase those. And we recommend purchasing them through us or through an outside party.
And if they did purchase them, do you all have guidance on how they're used inside of your time parameters, or do schools figure that out?
So we give the recommendation of saying that if you are going to use this, think about, do you want to pull a unit? If you do pull that unit, what are the Common Core standards for that unit? And then how do I make sure that I get those in other things? So we do have those recommendations. And when we say the language component, that is grammar, morphology, and spelling. And we'll look at grammar in or the language portion in just a minute. And so for the lesson at a glance, this is a 3rd grade lesson, so 60 minutes of reading. And I know that feels like a lot, but thinking about how do we break this 60 minutes up? Introducing the reading is going to be 15 minutes. Whole group reading of chapter 5 is 35 minutes. And then the lesson wrap up is 10 minutes. 40 minutes for writing. They're going to compare characters, and then planning for 20 minutes. And then the spelling, when we introduce spelling words, that will be with the sound S, and that will be for 20 minutes. Okay, let me go ahead and pull up this lesson. Again, I'm not going to teach that as a full lesson, but I kind of want to guide you through what this would look like as if you were a student. This is Unit 6. Within Unit 6, they have that unit introduction here. It tells you what's included in this unit, the reading, the spelling, the grammar, morphology, all of the vocabulary. All of the lessons are linked here. So this is going to be for lesson 6. I have my lesson guide here for lesson 6. It also has all of the daily lessons attached here. So I can just click activity page 6.1, and I have a smart PDF that I can type in, activity page 6.2, 6.3. And so it's easy to plan for the teacher because all of the materials are housed in one place. Now I'm going to have us log in as if we were the students. So this is what I'll have you do. First, I recommend, if you already have a personal username for Amplify, if you can do an incognito window or a private window, that's just so that it doesn't log you back into this. This is a demo account, meaning that like it's just for the sake of this specific lesson. But let me show you what we will do. So we are going to go to learning.amplify.com. Actually, I'll copy this. That is going to take you to this student account and co-teacher account. I'm going to assign you a number, and then you can put your name here. This is going to be your student account login, and this will be your password. This will be your teacher account login, and this will be your password. So Christine, I'll have you be number 1. So Christine, you can go here. Charlotte, you'll be number 2. Julie, you'll be number 3. Maggie, you'll be number 4. Annie, you'll be number 5. And Paula, you'll be number 6. And so we're going to start with the student account. And so what we'll do is we're going to click this learning.amplify.com. And I'm already logged in, but you're going to click log in with Amplify. Once you click log in with Amplify, we are doing the student first. So we want to copy this blue column. So copy your specific number. And then that password is going to be Amplify PD1. Can you just show me a thumbs up once you are logged in? Thank you, Maggie.
Mine says looks like my account is not signed up yet.
Did you click login with Amplify?
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Which number did you try?
I think you gave me 5.
Let me try. Let's do 8.
Oh, but now hold on, let me log out and try again.
Okay. And then your screen will look like this. Could you show me a thumbs up if you are logged in? Annie, did you try the incognito window? Because we don't want it to, if you are logged into another account, it could be trying to just auto log you into that account.
Let me see in a different browser if that helps. It's it's learning.amplify.
Learning.amplify.com, yes. Still not working?
No, but oh, okay, that worked. Yep. No,
Okay.
I think I'm in.
So your screen, this is the student screen. I'm going to go ahead and click teach. Now, once I teach, I can choose to not have a class. And so if I wanted the students just to work on their print materials and their print readers, I could just project this. But for the sake of this, I'm going to show you that digital. And so I'm going to click start class. And now it should prompt you so that your screen looks like mine. Now, for the sake of this, if you want to just split your screen and have it kind of like two things, you can do that. If you want to just look off my screen, but as I'm clicking through the slides, your screen from your student account should be changing. So I would click through this lesson here. We'd go over our objectives the same way. Again, the language here, it goes over how to introduce those. And I'm just going to show this one for now, I think. We're going over these vocabulary words. Same thing here. I have the word belch, to burp, fast, to not eat. We're going over a plan is made, the previous reading that we've done. And then for this is saying that if you can make predictions, and so this is just an opportunity for students to, you can make a prediction and I can say, all right, I want you to talk in and say a prediction, or I want you to type in and say a prediction. You have 3 minutes with a partner to talk about a prediction that you have. I do want to call out here that with these, the teacher can actually project any student work. So if I really liked what the student was saying, I can project that and say, I want to really call out what this student did. We're not going to spend too much time here, but just wanted to show you how the teacher can use these features. And then also within the reader, I wanted to show you. So we will, if you click that in the top left-hand corner, you'll see those 3 lines. We're going to go to chapter 5, the wedding feast. Now, a few accommodations that we have here are the teacher can click this. So the
Chapter 5.
It can be read aloud. Now, we do not always want to push this, but we encourage teachers that we want to push them to as much independent reading as possible. So maybe the teacher reads this first page to chapter 5, but then it means that the students are reading more of this page. If you remember back in that 60 minutes of reading, there's 35 minutes for this reading. There's 4 pages of content. So that means that it could be almost 10 minutes per page. So if there could be 3 10-minute pages, and then if the teacher reads 1 page, then that could be 5 minutes per page. So there is a lot of time devoted to the students reading. We want to build out that automaticity. And so again, just thinking about digital versus print, that is an option for the digital materials. I'm going to flip through a little bit more. Now we have an activity book page. So after we finish reading, we can practice with our activity book pages. I do want to call out here that with these activity book pages, it could be a helpful reference to say okay, for number 1 and 2, I just want you to speak your answer. Or maybe we're just doing question 1 and 2 as a class, and then I really want to focus on question 3, 4, 5 kind of thing. Then this is when they're comparing and contrasting those characters. We won't spend too much time here, but any questions about the digital experience or what's available for students in 3rd through 5th grade for the digital experience?
About you, when you first started, you said that there are 3 different modes. They could do the print, the digital, or a mix. Is that from what Amplify have seen so far? Is that up to the teacher, up to the school? Like, who's making that decision, or how is that being done?
It is totally up to the school. And so the schools can choose to only purchase print or only purchase digital. But most schools have purchased both, and most schools are figuring out which they want to do, but it is more up to the school. Thank you for that question.
And the student digital opportunity just starts in 3rd grade.
No, they have that in kindergarten through 2nd grade as well, the student, so they can log in as this. The only thing is I feel like I don't talk much about it with K2 teachers, maybe 2nd grade teachers, but I think that like for K2, they really are just using more of those print materials. But then students have all of the these readers. The students have all of these readers, and the students have the ability to have those activity book pages.
In the kindergarten versus 2nd grade, is there an option to have the text read aloud to them?
Yes, they have the readers. And so let me jump out. So if I click, and if you want, you can sign out of your student lesson. Let's go to, so on the Amplify Hub, all student licenses. So let me switch to 1st grade. They have the knowledge builder videos. These are like 3-minute videos that build on what students are doing in knowledge. They have the sounds library. So all of those sounds that they're learning come with a video that goes over how to write the sound.
Oi.
And then also a song that goes with it.
Oi, oi. A penny is a coin.
And then they also have the library. Within the library, they have all of these stories can be read.
As time went by, the frogs came to see that King Log was...
What's nice is that it's read by a professional voice actor and it's not a robot. So all of these are read by voices that are you can actually understand and enjoyable to listen to. And then in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they have the vocabulary app. The vocabulary app is going to reinforce that vocabulary that they're learning in that unit. They have the library, which we've looked at, and then the biblioteca, which is the Spanish translation. But let me show you the vocabulary app. So within the vocabulary app, it's going to give you some questions to help build that vocabulary, the same vocabulary that they're learning in those stories. What's nice about it is they do have the accommodation to listen to it. The point behind that is that vocabulary should not be limited to students' reading level. So if a student can't read this, we still want to make sure that they can practice reading this. The teacher can turn off that feature if students are not reading any of it and the student wants to push teachers or push students to reading more of it. But that is a scaffold that can be website.
Which tagline or catchy phrase best?
So they have that available to them. Let me see. Okay. Questions about 3rd through 5th grade. Let me see. I wish we had more time to talk about actually, let me pull up spelling now. And so I actually love spelling in 3rd through 5th grade. So 3rd through 5th graders are going to get this. It's that same code chart that they had in 1st and 2nd grade, but now it has all of those 150 spellings. And so now the spelling words can become more of like a dictionary of sounds. And so if the word is monarchy, we're going to break that word into its syllables. Mon, ar, key. All right, the sound mon, what sounds do we hear? 99% of the time, spelled with an M by itself. Ah, oh, And so you're able to just track that power bar. And so it's all of the K2 skills that they've learned. Now it's applying it more for that. And so I feel like I became a better speller from seeing this code just to say like, oh, it's helpful to know that the sound s, like 9 times out of 10, it's with an S, but then rarely it could be with a C or an SS or a CE or an SE or an ST or an SC. So if I'm just going to guess how to spell the word, the sound s, my best guess would be an S by itself. And so I found that spelling in CKLA, they make a shift from spelling being memorizing a list to really being, okay, this is not, and I tell teachers, don't even use the spelling as a grade for a report card because that doesn't feel equitable to me, because there will be students that English is their first language that are always going to have a little bit more of an uphill battle with spelling. Rather, it can be a data point to say, this is what students have learned in that code, and this is what sounds have not been mastered in that code. So for me, spelling was like this aha moment of like, I don't want students to fail because they speak Spanish at home. That doesn't feel fair to me, but I want to know in my instruction and intervention, oh, my students don't know they're R controlled because they're spelling. And so we want to go over R controlled in intervention, or I want to embed this into my tier 1 instruction. So I found like spelling to me was this aha moment of, oh, wow, that's the point of a spelling test, not this gotcha, now half of my classes is failing. Okay, let's go ahead and look at supporting all learners. So a few things with supporting all learners. We looked at that hub. They have that hub in K2 and 3.5. Flipbook images. Again, we encourage teachers to staple those up, make a content wall or a knowledge building wall. They have the sidebar supports for English language learners, the K2 additional supports. They have pausing points. Every unit has a pausing point. It's either going to be embedded in the middle or the end of the unit. I don't want to say a flex day because I think sometimes teachers take flex days and run with them, but it really is your temperature check to say, what does my class need? My pausing point day can be after the culminating writing activity and we go over an exemplar writing. My pausing point day could be after the culminating assessment and we go over how to write a culminating assessment. My pausing point could be before the writing and we go over the writing that we're going to do tomorrow so that the writing can be more independent. There are recommended pausing point activities, but I tell teachers, you know your students. So if you want to spend more time on writing, pull something writing that's in that same genre of focus. We also have that assessment and remediation guide and the decoding and encoding remediation guide in the intervention toolkit. These are great resources. They have all phonics instruction from kindergarten through 3rd grade in one place. So if a student does need help with decoding or encoding, the teacher can go to and look up phonological awareness, basic phonics, advanced phonics, fluency, comprehension, and really identify like, what does this student need to become a more automatic reader. We looked at those hubs. So this is for K2, this is for 3.5. They also have the, oh, I'm sorry, we talked about the flipbook images. They also have those multiple meaning word posters. And so the word purse, like in 1st grade, they'll learn about purses and fairy tales. So pursing your lips, and then also a purse like a bag. Those sidebar supports, those are going to be embedded in a lesson. Supports are going to be making it more accessible. Challenges are going to be making it more rigorous. We talked about those pausing point activities. There are recommended activities in the pausing points, but it is that teacher kind of choice. It could be something that is done whole group, it could be done something that is in small groups. And so reading with 3 individual groups and then rotating between. There is some recommendation to spend 2 or 3 days on pausing points, but that it will walk you through is, do you need to work on content? Do you need to work on writing? Do you need to work on grammar? Do you need to work on spelling? What does your class need at this particular time? But most of the skills that would be worked on will be skills that this unit is focusing on. So we'll say, like, if you focus on writing, have it be in the same genre of writing that we're doing now. Don't just go rogue and do like, oh, I want to do this. It should focus on building towards those primary focus objectives and those standards for this specific unit. The additional supports, these are embedded throughout skills. This is going to be just extra practice. So it will be something supplemental to say, like, do your students need more practice with phonological awareness? Here's some 8 words that you can practice. They have the multi-language learner supports embedded, entering, emerging, transitioning, expanding, and bridging. Each lesson has a multi-language learner support there to make it more accessible. These are those decoding and encoding remediation guides. They have them for each grade level. What I'll say about this is, if you I prefer the intervention toolkit because the intervention toolkit has it all in one place. And so I know phonological and phonemic awareness, I can click that and there'll be tons of lesson plans, activities, all the word lists, letter sounds. So if I know students need practice with their letter sounds, I can click this. Simple patterns, reading CVC words, complex patterns like the blends, st, multisyllabic words. So can students find the vowels and read those syllables? Fluency, comprehension. So within a skill here, so if I click simple patterns, they have lesson plans, activities to teach, and to monitor. So lesson plans, they have a blank lesson plan template. They also have lesson plans with the language in there. For teach, they have the word lists, worksheets, activities, games. For monitor, then they see, did we learn this specific skill or is it something that needs to be retaught? Okay, we have 9 minutes left. So implementation journey on page 49 to 52 of your participant notebook. This is more so for leaders, building leaders or administrators. And so this is thinking about within the implementation of your first or second year, what does foundational implementation look like? What does initial implementation look like? What does full operational look like? And what does innovation look like? Typically in that first and second year, schools are in that foundational and initial. It is a heavy lift. And there's a lot of change that goes into this, but we want to push schools to think about how can we go from foundational to initial implementation. That foundational implementation is maybe teachers don't even have the correct timing. 3rd grade teachers don't have a full 2-hour block. So they can't even do the initial implementation if they don't have all of the systems in place. And so we help schools identify, like, how do we get from foundational to initial? How do we move from initial to full operation? And those components are for resources. Do teachers have the teacher's guide, or are they just kind of winging it and saying, oh, I think I know this story. I know how to teach moral. I'm just going to kind of go a little rogue. Within that, we say that the teacher's guide should be out, right? If I'm cooking a recipe for the first time, I'm not going to have the cookbook in the cabinet. I'm not going to have the teacher's guide in the cabinet. I should have my teacher's guide in front of me, and it should be annotated with sticky notes or highlights or really kind of notes for me thinking about, what am I doing in this lesson? Now, the teacher don't need to lesson plan per se, as in, like, they don't have to submit lesson plans because the plan is there, but teachers need to internalize this. You'll know when you observe a lesson if a teacher has really internalized this, or if they just picked the teacher's guide up and said, okay, today we're learning about poetry. So it's just something that there is planning that goes into this, but thinking about, what are the objectives? What are the assessments? What are students expected to do? They also have it for engagement, adapting instruction, procedures, pacing, and physical space. So these are for that implementation journey for leaders to think about, how do we go from foundational to innovation. I want to pause here, and I know that that was brief, but I want to make sure that we have time for we can actually, any questions about the implementation journey or how to use this document with administrators? This is the tool that we use when we observe teachers. So typically we will go on a campus walk and identify where their grade level is at or where their specific teachers are at, and then make a goal to go from. So we would say, okay, if they're in initial implementation now, how would they get to full operation? And we'd kind of name full operation would be X, Y, and Z. And the ARG and the DERG, yes, there is a training that is a separate track. I wish I could say how to navigate that in 5 minutes, but there's a lot to it because it's everything from kindergarten through third grade. And so there's a lot to that. But if you want to explore them, you can find them on and you can use this if you do not have a teacher account, you can use this right here. So sign out of the student account. This would be your teacher account and this would be your password. And so once you log in, if I click CKLA, you'd find the assessment and remediation guide. Assessment and remediation guide. But like I said, it's 1,200 pages. So there's a lot to it. When you do have that training, you'll learn how to navigate with the table of contents, but that's where you can find it. It's if you scroll down, you'll see materials here. Okay, I wanted to pause here. Any questions, thoughts, wonderings? Is this the same group that is meeting on Friday?
Yes, and there'll be a couple of additions to folks who got the first version of this that you did back in the summer.
Okay, perfect.
How do you get from the student account to the teacher
So
account?
if you log out, you so let me go here, click sign out. Let me close out of all my tabs. And then you'll have this here. Click login with Amplify. And then you want to just copy the other username and password. So and I'll put this in the chat again so you have that. So once you have this open, we want the co-teacher account. And so I'll just click 15. I'm going to do 15. And then that password is the same. The username, the password for both the student and the teacher account is the same. And then you have access to all of these. And you'll see here the assessment and remediation guide. Were you able to log into the teacher account?
I'm trying to log out of the student account so I can get to the teacher
In the top
account.
right-hand corner, did you see, if you click, and then once you click co-teacher or co-student, whichever. Do you see on my screen where I clicked?
I see yours, but mine looks different than yours. But I don't want to waste people's time with mine.
Which tab are you on?
Calendars.
Because you might just be able to.
Oh, that might be it. Hold on. I'm still seeing like unit 6. I was going through like student materials. So it's like
there are a lot of tabs that open up. You might just be able to click out of those, but if you click, if you go to learning.amplify.com
Yeah.
be prompted to either, you'll see a home screen. If you see a home screen, you can click log out. If you do not see a home screen, once you go to learning.amplify.com, then
I'm just going to get rid of the student piece and see if that'll do it.
I'm in the same boat. It keeps opening me back up. Oh, nope, there it did. Okay.
You are too?
I can't do it